I wanted to be like a Gary V wannabe, so I hired a videographer. I spent all this money on equipment, and he was like following me around, but that didn't really work. Like those videos get like 12 views. So like 12 weeks into it, we kind of stopped. But then when COVID happened.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Blitz Growth. Really excited to have you all tuning in today. We have an amazing guest today. His name is Sunny, and he's extremely interesting. His background involves many things. So he's an entrepreneur, Forbes Council member, TEDx speaker, course instructor, and amazing storyteller. He started multiple companies and created a really interesting community called Night Owl Nation, which we're going to dive into. We'll also cover how to make amazing content, how to make it a lot more interesting with storytelling, and how to build engaged communities. So, Sunny, so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me on. Nice to meet you.
Great. So, just to give everybody a bit of information on who you are, what you do, what your main kind of value is that you provide. Give us a quick intro. Like, how do you introduce yourself at a party or at a conference or whatever it is? How do you tell people what you do?
Yeah, so now I just tell people that I'm a marketer and storyteller. I started out as a web designer. I started my own agency about 12 years ago. And then about a year ago, I started this my own community called Night Owl Nation, where I teach storytelling and we kind of practice storytelling together every week.
Nice. I love that. And then storytelling is quite broad. How do you sort of narrow it down to what is the point of being a good storyteller? What do you think the kind of value is of being a good storyteller in today's environment? So, who are the main people in your community? What kind of value do they get out of from improving their skill set?
Yeah. So I guess I never thought of myself as a storyteller in the beginning, but when I started putting out content, a lot of people started telling me like, son, can you teach me storytelling? You're such a great storyteller. I was like, okay, I guess I'm a storyteller now. And then there's a website called Domestika. They're kind of like a course kind of platform. And they reached out to me and asked me to do a storytelling course. Now it has over 21,000 students.
Nice.
And from there, I decided that I want to kind of create this community where we practice storytelling because, I tried teaching storytelling just like through a framework and stuff like that, but it didn't really work well because, it's kind of like riding a bike where like you can't really teach it through a book. Like you can, but then you still have to practice. So what I realized recently through this community is that, when you tell a story, a relatable story, the kind of story that makes people go, oh, I remember, like, that reminds me of something that happened in my life, right? And I thought I was the only one, but like, oh, you're like that too, right? When that happens, an instant bond is created because it's kind of like, when you hear a comedian tell a joke and you're kind of like, oh, that's so true. I never thought of it that way. Because I think it's almost like we share a secret that nobody else knows, that only we know, and that kind of creates this special bond. So I think that's what storytelling at the core is. That when I tell a story, something that happened in my life, that human experience, somebody else can connect to that and say, oh, this person is like me, and yeah, it's building a relationship with your audience that way.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I suppose that kind of applies to everything, whether you're in content creation, sales, marketing, HR, like any position that you're in, connecting with other humans on a deeper level is advantageous for sure. So
yeah,
kind of touches everything there. When it comes to using storytelling on social media, so, that's one of the biggest outlets that everybody has. They can pretty much publish whatever they want. How come, I would say, what makes a good content creator's content really good in incorporating storytelling versus maybe content creators that are just like not hitting the mark? So, for example, are there any ideas or are there any people that you're like, yeah, these guys are really good storytellers and that's probably why their social media following has millions of people, blah, 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 versus some people who might be putting in the same amount of effort, but maybe they're just missing the mark on the storytelling side, so nobody's relating to their content?
Yeah, I guess I see storytelling as, so in our community, I think there's like kind of two parts.
Mm.
One is when you tell a personal story, and I think if you look at kind of some of the top content creators out there, they're very good at this. Is, they're very good at kind of telling that transformation story from going from like the old me to the new me, right? And just being vulnerable in that sense. So when they do that, people kind of relate to it. There's an emotional aspect to it. So we do a lot of that in our community, but we also, what I notice is that when you keep doing that, you start to learn how to connect the dots between moments in your life. For example, if I say something like, I used to be, so the other day I was watching the show on Netflix, Rami Sethi's How to Get Rich. And there was
Yeah.
this couple who were afraid to open their mailbox because they had all these overpaid, unpaid bills. And that instantly reminded me of a time in my life when, like I was scared to look at my bank account because I didn't want to know how much money is in there, right? And when I told that story, somebody in our community immediately said, "Oh, that reminds me of the time when I didn't want to get on the scale because I didn't want to see how much I weigh," right?
Mm.
So there's this like dot connection that's happening. And when you're able to do that, you can kind of create these metaphors and analogies. And a lot of the content that I do is like that. What I'll do is, you know, so one of the most popular posts that I've done is on TikTok, where I'm talking about this show that I was watching. It's called The Island. It's kind of like The Survivor, that type of reality show. And there was guy there. There was a contestant there who was kind of like his military background, orderly, and every day he would like catch fish with his spear, and then everybody gets to eat. But there was another guy there who was kind of a creative type of person, and he was trying to like create this net so he can catch a lot of fish at once. But for weeks it didn't work, so everybody kind of started blaming him and like kind of turned on him until like a few weeks later they caught a lot at once, and everyone was celebrating, and they were like, "Oh, now we can eat well," right? And when I was watching that, it immediately connected the dot with the story I heard from Steve Jobs, where while they were making the Macintosh, the creative Macintosh team for 4 years or whatever was creating the Macintosh, doing these things, they still had to sell the Apple II and make money and keep the business going, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I immediately connected that dot, and I was like, "Oh yeah, you need an orderly person like that who's gonna just keep catching that fish one by one, so we can still eat. But we also need that creative person to create that net for the future, like innovate and create products for the future." And that's kind of, you need both in every company, right?
Yeah.
So that was like the post that I did, and that got like 1.5 million views. And so that's kind of like what I tell people: when you start practicing storytelling and you can connect the dots between these stories, you can almost use it as a metaphor to teach a lesson, right? How tie it to like this life lesson. How does it tie to a business lesson or something like that?
Yeah, I do see a lot of content around kind of like making analogies of something that's happened in society or in a show or whatever, and it's like how you can use that advice in business, or how you can use that advice in, design, or all those different ways that these stories are being used across any vertical. So
Exactly.
you can really teach a lot of lessons with the same content across multiple verticals.
Exactly.
Awesome. That sounds great. And then when it comes to social media and storytelling, what are some easy ways to get started, or what are some easy ways of becoming a better storyteller? Because I feel like it's something that people don't put enough time and effort into, but it does make a big difference. As you were saying, the people who do really well on social media and get lots of likes, shares, and comments and a lot of awareness, those guys are generally pretty good storytellers, whereas the people who maybe are not as good are still putting in just as much effort, but they're not getting the output.
One of the things that I tell people is this one habit kind of helped me become a good storyteller, which is, when I used to work at a 9 to 5 job, I was so shy. And every time, like, at the end of a meeting, usually, my boss or manager or somebody will say, "Any questions?" And then even though I have questions, I'm confused. I would not say anything, right? And then I noticed that everybody else doing the same thing. Like they had the same question, but nobody was asking. So when I started my agency, and I did the same thing when I have a meeting, and then at the end I'll say, any questions? And like I noticed that nobody was answering. Nobody was asking questions. So what I started doing is every time I say something, I would say, for example, right? So I would give some sort of a statement and then say, for example, and then I'll give an example. And then usually after I give the example, people will say, oh, I get it now. So I think to really be a good practice to get started is every time you give an advice, right? You know, like a simple one would be like, slow and steady wins the race, right? For example, right? And then you can tell the story of tortoise and the hare, and like you could, or you can give example from your own, right? Another post that here's a better example. So as you can see, I give a lot of examples. So
I love it.
One of the posts that I did was, hey, a lot of posts that I do is I state some sort of advice, a popular advice, and I say that's a myth, and the truth is here, something like that. So I'll give a myth, and then I'll tell the truth, and I'll say, for example. So a good one I did was, people say if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life, right? But I started a design agency because I love design, but I spend very little time doing design. And I spend a lot of time doing, sales, kissing my client's ass, or, babysitting employees, and all of these, all these other things. So, the better advice would be, you can't always do what you love, but you can choose to love everything you do. So there's like a short example of like myth, truth, and I give an example in between.
Nice. So that's a great takeaway. Anybody listening, like giving examples of anything that you're trying to instill with your audience is a great way to connect on a better level, especially if the examples are more relatable. Okay, nice. And then, a little bit more towards your community. I know you wanted to, focus in on helping people practice their storytelling. What gave you the idea to make a paid membership community for this?
Yeah, a few things. Why don't I quickly tell you like my story? So I started an agency. We used to primarily work with clients, like corporate clients, like American Red Cross, Spotify, Columbia University. And I was at that time, I was kind of getting sick of it, because when you work with a corporate client, you're usually working for a marketing director, CMO, someone like that, at the end of the day, which is still kind of like a 9-to-5 job, right? So they don't want to do anything innovative, risk-taking. They're still like, they don't want to get fired. So everything was always safe, right? We were doing a lot of boring projects. And then we started working with this woman named Gabby Bernstein. And that's kind of when I started getting introduced to personal branding. And she introduced us to people like Jay Shetty. Then we work with Mel Robbins and Mark Randolph, the co-founder of Netflix. And during that time, I noticed that, Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank was starting a YouTube channel. Will Smith was starting a YouTube channel, right? I was like, what is going on, right? Why are these billionaires like all of a sudden starting like social media? And then I think around that time also I saw, Kylie Jenner started a cosmetic company, which got valued at over $1 billion, right? All because of her personal brand. So I thought there's something here. I really believe that personal brand was kind of like the future of branding. So I tried to, I wanted to be like a Gary V wannabe. So I hired a videographer. I spent all this money on equipment, and, he was like following me around, but that didn't really work. Like those videos get like 12 views. So like, 12 weeks into it, we kind of stopped. But then when COVID happened, I just took my Zoom recordings, like when I talk with clients or our employees or something like that. I took my Zoom recordings and I started posting it, and that started kind of getting traction. And then I started making carousels, and that started getting more traction. And I grew my social media kind of that way. And
What sort of content was that? Like the Zoom recordings? What sort of content was in there? Why were
yeah,
people
so the
interested in it?
one of the first ones that I did was it was like I had an intern who was like kind of lost about like, oh, I'm not passionate. I don't know if I'm passionate about my job or something
Mm,
like that. So I was advising her, and I said, when I was just telling her a story. Like when I was 19, I had a job at this place called Kumon. It was a
mm.
math learning center.
I know, come on, yeah.
Yeah, and my job was to just they give me the answer sheets, and students will bring me their paper, and I just match the grades, and my job was to grade papers. It was the most
Mhm.
boring job in the world. It was just to, but then I I took that job so seriously, and I memorized all the answers, so I didn't have to go back and forth. So I was
Mm.
grading like 3 times faster than all the other graders. And so I no matter what job I had, it's kind of like the advice before. No matter what job I have, I try to do my best. I try to become the best at that, and I try
Mm.
to be passionate about whatever is in front of me, right? And that kind of led me to all the opportunities that I got, and it kind of got me to where I am. So I was kind of telling her that story, and then that was part of a longer conversation, but I just like took that clip and then uploaded. But that's kind of what I
Mm.
did. Every time I just on a Zoom call when I'm giving somebody an advice or I'm teaching something, I would just
Mm.
clip that out and post it.
Wow, that's a genius idea for content creation, because repurposing that, you're doing it anyway. So,
Yeah, and
just
it's more
having,
authentic.
mm, yeah, 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 that's great. That's super interesting. And I'm sure a lot of people, uh, never get to see that behind the scenes footage,
Yeah,
of what it's like, maybe being a CEO or a founder who's dealing with these different, employee difficulties or whatever it may be, because that stuff doesn't really get published.
no, and people love that. So to kind of like finish the answer, so it started growing, and then about 2 years ago, everybody was like, "Son, can you create a course on growing Instagram?" So I actually, until that time, I worked with a lot of clients that sells courses, so I know how to market courses and all of that. So I was about to launch like this Instagram course, but while I was writing the sales page and things like that, I noticed like, okay, I'm making promises, right? Okay, this is gonna help you grow Instagram and all of that. But then deep down inside, something was wrong. I'm like, I know that most of these people are not even gonna do anything with it, right? They're just gonna take the course. A lot of them are not even gonna finish it. So something inside, like I couldn't do it. So I kind of went into this like existential crisis, and I actually disappeared for like a year. I got off of Instagram. Everybody was like, "What's going on?" And then during that time, I kind of came to a realization. Both my mom and my sister are professors, and I've been talking to them a lot. And they were talking about like intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, and how we have to have make learning fun, and you have to practice and things like that. So I realized the only way I can really get people to grow Instagram or get better in storytelling is by having them practice. So which is why I decided to create a membership instead. And there's another part to that, which is I remember like in the old days there was I have some audience in developing countries like India, Colombia, Nigeria, and I was helping some of them kind of like um, just to be helpful. And there was this one girl, her name is Hina, and her whole in India, like the average household income is like $300-$400, right? And she was doing like she had a Instagram account where she teaches Canva, and she was charging like $25 an hour. And I told her like at first I kind of got her to show up on video and be more confident in video, and then she started killing it. And then I told her, "Oh, you should charge $150 an hour." And I sent her a client, and this client paid her $300 for 2 hours of work, which is like the same amount of money that her parents make in a month, right? And that kind of like really boosted her confidence. And like now she's like speaking in schools and all of that. But what I noticed is like, oh, it was much more fulfilling for me to help this person who can like really elevate their life, right? compared to kind of just like in the Western markets, yeah, I can help them too, but it wasn't as meaningful. So I wanted to create a membership that is low enough in price so that, people there can join. And that's kind of how that pricing point came about. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it's super interesting as well because it's not the usual structure, I feel, for a membership.
No,
Because
yeah.
explain what happens in this membership. You guys all jump on a call and then you practice storytelling. Like, I've
Yeah.
never heard of a membership like this. How does it work?
Yeah, so in the beginning, one thing I noticed from my previous business is that whenever I just try to plan too far out, it just never really works out. I learned that like in business, you just have to kind of take the next right step and let it evolve. So how this started is, at first it wasn't called Night Owl Nation. It wasn't even a membership. One day on Instagram, I noticed that there's a function called close friends, right? So I can add people to my close friends, and then I can post an Instagram story only they can see. So I started charging people $5 a month, and then I added them to my close friends, and I would just, while I'm working, I would show them behind the scenes of what I'm doing and things like that.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's how it started. And then people are like, oh, we should be a community and get on Zoom call and things like that. So every Sunday we started getting on Zoom calls, and I would teach something and something like that. And while we were and then after like a month or two, we got on Circle, which is like a community platform. And then I started putting everything in there. And then after a while, I realized that, oh, you know what? I heard this podcast where this church was talking about how when COVID happened, most churches like lost a huge amount of their congregation, except this one church actually grew because they focused on small groups. And how and this pastor was talking about how as church grows big, like the small groups is really where the community happens. So that
like
really
location
resonated with me.
or like location wise or interest wise, like, or niche
No,
down.
I mean, those were just small groups where people got together and do Bible studies and things like that. But what happens is, when you're in a small group, there's something about like, these are people that I know, I feel comfortable with, and I feel like they depend on me. So I show up every week or something like that. So we applied that. We started small groups, and every week I would give them a prompt. I would say, okay, this week, I want you to talk about a time when, you thought something you thought to be true turned out to be false or something like that. And then they would get on the small group and they'll share, okay, this one time when I went to band camp or whatever it is. And then they'll just kind of share stories like that. And so they meet every week on their own. And then I just teach on Sundays. Yeah.
Interesting. And then when you do your teaching, you say you give them the prompt and they all break out into smaller groups. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, actually, because people are from all over the world and at different times. So what we do is they have their own small group meeting time during the week. Okay. So every small group, so there are 6 people in each small group. And so they meet in their own time. I'm not there. And then the time I teach is on Sundays.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah, really interesting setup. Yeah, not the common membership, which is really cool because differentiation is everything. And you can create something unique or something special, then that's a huge, factor of being able to offer something that other people can't. So that's really interesting how that came about. And then I was going to say, when it comes down to the different revenue streams that you've generated, do you feel like courses or memberships is the best option to go for someone who hasn't started either and is trying to make that decision?
I think membership is a little bit tougher in terms of monetizing because first you need a big audience because, a lot more people will be willing to, let's say, buy a $500 course than join a $20 a month membership. Like, that makes no sense, right? Because, but whenever somebody has to put their credit card where it's saved and it's just billing them recurring every month, for some reason, that's a much harder sell than a one-time purchase, right? So even with our clients, what I noticed is that only like real, true kind of super fans join the memberships.
Mm-hmm.
So what I like to say is have a membership so you can cultivate your community and you can build that community. But you should still sell like a course or, like whether it's mastermind, or you should still have a different product that's going to really supplement that income, because I don't think membership alone is like the best in terms of profit unless you're really thinking scale, right? So that's kind of where we're looking at. We want to get to a point where there's scale. And the beauty of membership is actually that consistent revenue, right? Because every month we can expect, a certain amount of revenue coming in. Whereas with courses, every time you launch, you might have $1 million launch, and then, next year you might have like, half of that or something like that,
Yeah. So the course is the military man, and the net is the memberships.
Exactly. Exactly.
No, that's great. And then last question I have for you. AI is all the talk of the town, and everybody's going ballistic right now about how AI is changing their industries. Storytelling, really interesting niche, and how AI will affect that. But what's your thoughts on where we're going with AI for content creation, AI for copy, storytelling, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so I don't know too much about AI, but I know like our videos use that AI, I forgot what it's called, the one that creates images. But they use that to Midjourney to use like to create B-rolls, when we do our like short clips and things like that. They use that to make B-rolls and shit. But sorry. But what I think is, so I've used ChatGPT to give it prompts to say, okay, tell me a story about something that teaches an entrepreneurial lesson that talks about authenticity or something like that, right? So it'll tell me, create a story. And I say, make it more conversational. And then, because there are certain prompts certain tips that I give all of my students. So I kept kind of teaching ChatGPT the same thing. But at the end, what I realized is that what makes the content good is not facts, right? It's somebody's opinion, because not everybody has the same opinion. So when I come on social media and I say, I believe this, right? Versus somebody else says, I believe in this, right? That opinion is kind of what draws people to that content. Like if I say, oh, I think, for example, let's say, I believe Apple is better than Android. Like iPhone is better than Android because whatever, right? And then some people might say, no, Android is better because you can customize everything, blah, blah, right? But then if a ChatGPT doesn't have an opinion, right? Because in order to have an opinion, there has to be morality. You have to be able to decide what's good, what's bad. And because ChatGPT doesn't have an opinion, ChatGPT will say something like, Apple is good because of this, but under this context, Android might be better. So they're kind of lukewarm in their story, because
everything is average.
Exactly. Because they're trying to give you facts, all the nuanced facts, right? So I think that's kind of where I noticed that AI lacks, because AI cannot give you a moral opinion.
Yeah, no, it is very interesting where it's all going. And yeah, I feel like storytelling is one of those things that it can't really kind of replace just yet. But yeah, definitely good way to break it down. There's only facts. There's no opinions or analysis.
Exactly.
Done. But no, very interesting. And where can we find out more about what you're working on, most recent projects, a little bit more about your community, that sort of stuff? Let us know how we can connect with you.
Yeah, the best place would be my Instagram, which is it's sun.yi, sun.e. And like everything's in my link in bio. All my content is there, so that's probably the best place to go.
Nice. And if you do, definitely go and take a look. The content is amazing. You've done such a good job at creating amazing content. So amazing job there. And yeah, your site as well is incredibly well designed. So if anybody's looking for inspiration,
thank you so much.
go check that out. But yeah, Sunny, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you for dropping all these valuable nuggets on how to improve content, incorporate a bit of storytelling and how to get started with being a better storyteller. It's been very, very valuable. So everybody listening, hopefully you enjoyed it. Let us know what you liked about this episode and what you want to see next. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey guys, we put a bunch of effort into making great content for this YouTube channel. So please hit subscribe, leave us a comment, hit like, and tell a few friends about it.